Hi, so I wanted to talk today about talking with kids about pronouns and people's pronouns and when pronouns change, maybe your own pronouns. I think there's an idea that using different pronouns and having to explain that to kids is hard and confusing, and that maybe kids won't get it. Like, how do you explain to a kid that somebody's pronouns have changed? Like, that's gonna confuse them, right? And I just want to tell you that kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and they really understand things as long as you keep the language that you use simple and you don't over explain what you're trying to tell them. When my son Leo came out as being transgender, that was like 2016, so 6.5 years ago, I think, if that math is right. I'm really tired today, so if that math is wrong, don't feel like you need to tell me. Just correct the math and it's fine. A lot of my nieces and my nephew especially were really little. And so one of my sisters-in-law was like, I need to figure out how to tell the kids, and what do you think about this explanation? And so what she told her daughter and son was this. She's like, Leo's birth name is Ashley. She said to the kids, Ashley doesn't feel good in her body, and so she's going to take some medicine to make herself feel better, and she's going to use a different name and different pronouns. And they were like, okay, great. And so they started calling my child by a different name and using different pronouns, and never really thought anything much about it. So I think that we worry more about how our kids are going to react than we need to, because for us as adults, we've had a longer time of using someone's name and pronouns, and I've talked about this before. We have that muscle memory of a person's name and pronouns and a long history of having used them. And so our brains automatically associate somebody with a name and automatically associate somebody with pronouns. And when we see them, it's like a habit to use that name and pronouns. Kids don't have that long history with somebody the same way that we do. And for them, they're just like, okay, whatever. Like, you want me to use a different name? What is it? Like, and then they just start using it. And they're like, you want me to use different pronouns? Like, what are they? And then they just start using them. And so there are some great books out on the market about transgender topics for kids. I've shared some here before. And there's one especially about pronouns, and it's called What Are Your Words by Katherine Locke. And it's a book about pronouns. And it's right here if you haven't seen it yet or read it. And it's about this boy and his uncle who uses they, them pronouns. And so they're going to have a visit together. And they talk about words and how words can describe a person, whether it's their pronouns or words about them. Like, he talks about how the boy in the book, who is Ari, talks about how his words sometimes are happy and creative and funny, and he knows them right away, but sometimes he doesn't know what his words are. He doesn't know how he feels or what he wants to use to describe himself. And it's about his journey to figure out too what his pronouns are, like what are his words. And so it's a really great book too for kids to be able to read with your kids, to understand that Pronouns are just words that you use to describe a person in place of their name. I mean, that's essentially what a pronoun is. It's a word that is used in place of another word, right? And so a pronoun in regards to a person is a word that's used in replacement of their name. And so where we sometimes get hung up and where kids sometimes get hung up, and this was especially true in our family, is when they're using gender neutral pronouns. And it's generally if they haven't had any experience with those pronouns, and it's just practice, and it's just getting used to the idea of using words to describe somebody that maybe they haven't used before. Like they, them, and their are not words that maybe they've ever used in relationship with a person. And so sometimes that can be a little complicated, and it just takes practice. And then over time, you know, like with anything else, kids get used to that and they fall right into being able to use gender neutral pronouns. When it gets trickier is when somebody uses a combination of pronouns. Like let's say someone uses he, him, his, and they, them, their pronouns, and they all and in that case it's perfectly okay to alternate between different pronouns when you're talking about that person. Sometimes you would use he, sometimes you would use they, and that's fine and normal and perfectly acceptable. That's confusing sometimes for kids, especially when they're little, because they don't understand why it's not consistent. Like they have a hard time with the inconsistency of that. So you can just tell them to pick one. Pick which pronoun you're going to use when you talk about this person, and don't worry about what pronouns everybody else is using when they talk about that person. And that is like a helpful tip for kids who have somebody in their life who is using a combination of pronouns, to just have them pick one, which and you know, they might flip back and forth. Like one day they might choose to use one and they might decide they want to try out the other one to see how it feels, and that's fine. Kids are unpredictable too. But start out with having them just use one so that it cuts down on the confusion. So I wanted to just share about this book. This book is really fabulous. I read it with one of my nieces after I first got it. We meet on FaceTime regularly and read books to each other. And she was in, I'm trying to think, let me see, does it say what year? When this book came out in 2021. So she was in second grade when we read this book, and she really enjoyed it. When I finished it, she was like, that was a really good book. And I was like, I know, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So I would really recommend this book. I'm gonna do a review of it and put it up on my website so you can get a little bit more of a look into the book, more than just, I think this is a great book and that you should have it. And you know, it's about a boy and his uncle and discovering their pronouns. But I mean, at the heart of it, really, that's what the book is about. But it's an excellent book to use with kids. I think it would be a fantastic book to use in a school, in a classroom, in a library. And you know, picture books aren't just for kids. So if you're an adult, I even would recommend it to read, to be able to pass along to your family. If they're having a hard time with figuring out pronouns, you could be like, hey, there's this great book. You could buy it and read it, and maybe you'd have a better understanding of pronouns and how they work. So that's all I have for today. I thought I'd just hop on here real quick and do this little video. And I hope you are having a good week, and we'll talk again soon. Okay, bye.